Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
Chapter 1. The Introduction. On a brisk October evening in 2015, a thick fog rolled through the quaint coastal town of Roseland, Massachusetts. The air was laced with an unsettling chill as residents settled into their homes, igniting fireplaces and preparing for the impending winter. Among them was a local high school history teacher, Clara Hargrove, who had dedicated her life to shaping young minds. With her warm smile and nurturing spirit, she was a beloved figure in the community, known for her engaging lessons and penchant for field trips to historical sites. But on this fateful night, things would take a sinister turn, forever altering the fabric of Roseland. The quiet town, illustrated in sepia tones and wrapped in the embrace of familiar comforts, would soon find itself caught in the grips of an unnerving mystery. As the clock struck 10, Clara's phone remained silent, and the cozy atmosphere of her home transformed into a haunting silence. It was unlike her to stray from routine, especially without informing anyone. The following day, Clara's absence was noticed by her colleagues and students. Her classroom door remained locked. The chairs that should have been occupied by eager learners now left empty. Worry rippled through the community like an electric current, racing through the hearts of those who cared for her deeply. Whispers of unease began to mingle with the familiar rustling of leaves as her friends sought out answers amidst the chaos of uncertainty. It was only a few hours later, when Clara's car was discovered parked at a deserted trailhead, that the somber reality began to unfold. Emergency responders arrived to investigate, having received reports of a vehicle left unattended in a location notorious for wildlife and treacherous terrain. Little did they know, this discovery was merely the tip of an iceberg, beneath which lay secrets waiting to surface and a community on the brink of sorrow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the trees, the search for Clara Hargrove commenced, and the serenity of Roseland began to crack. Chapter 2. The Victim. Clara Hargrove was more than just a teacher. She was a confidante, a mentor, and a beacon of stability for the students of Roseland High. Born and raised in this close-knit town, she navigated her own formative years in the very hallways she would later walk as an educator. Her passion for history was infectious, a gift she shared with students during lessons on the Revolutionary War, often bringing artifacts to class that ignited their curiosity. Beyond her expertise, Clara had an innate ability to connect with her pupils, offering them a listening ear when they faced challenges. While she appeared to live an enviable life steeped in ordinary joys, Clara carried her own burden. A few years prior, her husband Richard had succumbed to a long battle with cancer, leaving her not only a widow, but deeply isolated. Friends had watched her grieve, often suggesting support groups or social outings. But she had always brushed them off with a polite smile. Instead, she filled her time with schoolwork, longing for the days when their shared laughter echoed in their home. As the investigation into her disappearance progressed, the police interviewed students and colleagues, unraveling the threads of her life that seemed vivid yet complex. Clara's closest friend, Vera, revealed the depths of her sorrow. She put on a brave face, but I knew she was lonely, especially after Richard. Sarah confessed, her voice thick with emotion. She loved those kids. She poured everything into them, trying to fill the void. But Clara's life, though touched by tragedy, had not been consumed by it. she found solace in her evening strolls, often along the rugged coastal trails that curled around the tip. The tranquil sound of waves crashing against the shoreline provided a backdrop to her thoughts, a brief reprieve from her grief. Yet, it was in this very setting, rich with nature's beauty, that Clara's fate would soon take a dark turn, and the heart of a community would begin to shatter as they came to grips with the reality of her absence. With each passing hour, as search teams scoured the dense wooded trails, questions and fears crept into the minds of those who knew her. Had she been an accident, or had something more sinister claimed the life of the vibrant woman who had once breathed life into their community? As the sky darkened, a new sense of foreboding settled over Roseland as its residents braced for the troubling truths that lay just beyond the horizon. Chapter 3. Crime scene. The early morning fog hung thick in the air, shrouding the trailhead in an eerie stillness. As dawn broke, a team of local volunteers, drawn by worry and love for Clara Hargrove, gathered near her abandoned car. The vehicle was parked haphazardly on the gravel, the driver's side door slightly ajar, a scene that stirred unease among those who had come to help. Rustling leaves whispered secrets beneath their feet, while the trees loomed overhead like silent sentinels, holding their breath as the search unfolded. State police soon arrived, their uniforms a stark contrast against the muted hues of nature. The lead investigator, Detective Mark Davis, carefully surveyed the area, piecing together the fragments of an uncertain night. A search dog had already been deployed, the animal bounding into the thick brush, nose to the ground, following its instincts. "Spread out," he commanded, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Stay within shouting distance and report anything strange. As they fanned out, the stillness was punctuated only by the distant call of a mourning dove and the crackling of twigs underfoot. Gisa, one of Clara's former students, knelt beside the car, her heart racing. An overturned coffee cup lay in the passenger seat, and Clara's favorite scarf was draped casually over the gearshift. Each personal item was a haunting reminder of the woman who should have been there, yet the absence struck more profoundly, a vacuum that deepened with every passing second. About 100 yards away from the car, the search dog suddenly came to an abrupt halt, nose raised high, tail stiff. The dog's handler rushed to its side, heart pounding. Something was out there. Through thick brush and brambles, they followed the animal until they stumbled upon a secluded clearing that had long been forgotten. The atmosphere shifted palpably as they stepped into the clearing, where the light filtered down like a spotlight through gaps in the trees. It was then that they saw it, a hand, lifeless against the damp earth. Fingers curled slightly as if grasping for a last breath. A chill ran through the group, an unbearable weight of dread filling the air. Detective Davis quickly established a perimeter, calling for additional backup. "We found something," he reported into his radio, his voice steady but grim. Clara's absence was no longer a mystery. They were now faced with the grim reality that a crime had likely taken place, an act that shattered the fragile peace of Roseland and sent shockwaves through a community unprepared for loss. As the first responders cordoned off the area, the sun rose higher, casting an unforgiving glare on the unfolding tragedy. The serene landscapes of Roseland were forever altered, now indelibly marked by grief and fear. Little did they know the truth behind Clara's death would unravel layers of deception and buried secrets that lay just beneath the surface of their idyllic town. Chapter 4. The Early Investigation. The day dragged on as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Detective Mark Davis stood at the forefront of the unfolding investigation, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the last hours of Clara Hargrove's life. Meanwhile, uniformed officers gathered evidence, their demeanor a blend of professionalism and empathy, aware that they were tasked not just with a job, but with the community's heartbreak. The initial autopsy results arrived sooner than expected, carried on the grim faces of forensic specialists. Clara had been dead for several hours at the time of discovery, a statement that both confirmed the community's worst fears and ignited questions like wildfire. The cause of death was blunt force trauma, but the details remained sparse, leaving them to grapple with a haunting uncertainty. Was Clara targeted? Or was this a crime of opportunity? Detective Davis quickly shifted the investigation towards establishing a timeline of Clara's last known movements. Interviews with friends, family, and colleagues flooded in, some recounting interactions as mundane as coffee chats, while others revealed troubling thought patterns haunting her since Richard's death. As he sifted through testimonies, one comment stood out, illuminating a shadowy potential motive. Sarah, Clara's closest friend, mentioned a recent altercation Clara had with an unknown man at the local grocery store. He seemed to be following her. I thought it was harmless at first, but Clara mentioned feeling uneasy. She said he looked at her like he knew something. Sarah nervously recalled, her eyes darting as if the memory was etched vividly in her mind. Davis noted this detail, contemplating the implications of a stalker hidden in plain sight. As he delved deeper into Clara's life, he discovered an intricate web of connections. The teacher was active in her community, attending charity events and school board meetings. Yet an unsettling question gnawed at him. Was someone harboring resentment beneath her warm exterior? In a bid to uncover more, detectives decided to canvass the neighborhood, hoping to gather additional information. They knocked on doors showing residents pictures of Clara, inquiring if anyone had seen her in the days leading up to her disappearance. Most of their responses were neutral, filled with shock and disbelief, except for one. A neighbor mentioned a strange vehicle seen parked nearby several times, a faded blue van that seemed oddly out of place. With the early investigation yielding more questions than answers, the pieces of Clara's life began to intertwine with the dark specter of her death. Each new lead weighed heavily, tethering the community in a haunting grip of uncertainty. As residents started to wonder who could have wanted to harm the beloved teacher who had once brightened their lives, the haze of suspicion that enveloped Roseland threatened to smother its inhabitants in fear, provoking thoughts both comforting and chilling. How well do you really know your neighbors? Chapter 5. And dead ends. Days turned into weeks, and the urgency of the investigation into Clara Hargrove's murder began to ebb, replaced by the palpable weight of despair. Detective Mark Davis felt the grim reality of each dead end they encountered. The leads that initially sparkled with promise dwindled into dampened hopes. The faded blue van, abandoned and devoid of real evidence. The witnesses, most were consumed with their own lives, struggling to recall anything significant amidst the chaos. In the days following the discovery of Clara's body, forensic teams meticulously combed through her house, looking for anything that could illuminate the darkness surrounding her death. They found receipts, a few letters stashed amid books of history, and a calendar littered with appointments and social events. but nothing hinted at a threat. No directly incriminating things, only the minutiae of a person who had dedicated her life to her students and her hometown. An exhausting interview schedule wound its way through the department, with each passing session chipping away at precious time. Darsley didn't pan out as expected. The man at the grocery store was confirmed to be a delivery driver working on the other side of town. He had a solid alibi, confirmed by time-stamped records. The detective's heart sank heavier with each dismissed lead, each hollow plea from anxious townsfolk desperately seeking resolution. As a last resort, Davis revisited the scene of the crime, a small clearing hidden among the thick trees and Clara's favorite escape, now a maintenance burden of grief. He walked the trail alone, retracing her final steps on that fateful night, the sharp crunch of twigs underfoot echoing eerily against the stillness. The broken branches and disturbed earth held secrets, remnants of a struggle captured only in nature's embrace. Yet, the absence of other clues gnawed at him, a sharp contrast to the hauntingly vivid image of Clara's final moments swirling in his mind. What had happened here? A few yards away, he noticed a flash of color, a distinct piece of fabric tangled in the underbrush. Squatting down, he hesitantly reached out, only to find it was a frayed scrap of deep blue cloth. Pulling it free, his pulse quickened. Could this be part of the missing vehicle? He pocketed the strap, his resolve strengthening. Soon, a new search would begin flushing out suspects based on their clothing and behaviors, rather than mere coincidence. But as Davis trudged back to his car, the air heavy with frustration, he couldn't shake the growing thought that time was slipping away, and the weight of Clara's legacy rested heavily upon him. She deserved justice. But the deeper they entered into the investigation, the darker the trails seemed to become. The shadows of Roseland felt all-consuming, as if they were suffocating truth itself. Chapter 6. A break in the case. Stepped in when Detective Mark Davis received an unexpected call late one evening, a tip that cut through the fog of despair that had settled over the investigation. A woman named Ellen, a waitress at a diner on the outskirts of town, claimed to have witnessed something peculiar on the night Clara vanished. Her voice trembled, yet urgency echoed through every word. Davis arrived at the diner within the hour, its neon sign flickering above like a beacon of hope against the darkening sky. As he entered, the familiar aroma of coffee and frying bacon hung thick in the air, accompanied by the low murmur of late-night patrons. Ellen pointed to a booth in the corner, her hands shaking slightly as she relayed her story. "I remember the blue van," she said, lowering her voice as if speaking in the presence of a ghost. "It was here that night." Ellen's recollection burst forth with a torrent of details, painting a mental picture that shocked Davis. She described how the van parked outside the diner around 9 p.m., just after Clara had left for her walk. There was a man sitting in the driver's seat, and he kept glancing around. I found it odd," she continued, recalling how the man appeared on it. "What? I remember Clara passing by the window. It's like the air shifted." He became tense, almost predator-like. Davis leaned closer, his heart racing with the possibility that this might provide a lifeline. "Did you see anything else? Did the man get out of the van?" "No," Ellen replied, shaking her head. "But I caught a glimpse of him when I went outside to take a break. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie. That's all I could see." As she spoke, Memories flooded her mind, unbid. She recalled how the van had suddenly revved its engine, leaving just moments later, taking a right turn toward the same segment of trail where Clara had been last seen. A cool wave of realization washed over Davis. This was the elusive blue van that had haunted his thoughts, now coming into focus as a powerful lead. The detective wasted no time securing the information. With the details fresh in his mind, he returned to the precinct, eager to compile a sketch based on Ellen's description. But he also knew there was more to uncover. To review surveillance footage from the diner and nearby intersections to trace the van's movements. As he worked late into the night, piecing together a strategy for pursuing this lead, the darkness that had shrouded Roseland began to lift. This newfound direction unveiled the chilling prospect that they were now not just searching for a killer, but a reflection of a community's deep-seated fears and more than willing to shield secrets that lay dormant beneath the surface. For the first time since Clara's murder, Detective Davis felt a renewed spark of hope flicker within him. Justice was closer than ever. Yet he knew the road ahead would still be fraught with danger, riddled with the shadows of unresolved truths waiting to emerge. Chapter 7. The Suspect. The following days brimmed with a sense of urgency as the investigation delved deeper into the identity of the man in the blue van. Detective Mark Davis had spent long hours reviewing the surveillance footage from the diner, carefully scrutinizing every blotch of color and shape in the grainy images. To his relief, a breakthrough came when they found the van captured leaving the diner just minutes after Clara had passed, but officers dispatched to seek out leads. It was shortly after that they tracked down the vehicle to a rundown apartment complex about 5 miles from Roseland's borders. The address belonged to a man named Jason Malone, a convicted felon who had previously been incarcerated for assault. Malone fit the description Ellen had provided, a tall figure with a reputation for volatility and discontent. As the squad car pulled up outside the agent complex, apprehension settled over the officers like an unwelcome fog. Davis stepped out, glancing up at the peeling paint. And broken windows above. The ground felt uneven beneath his feet. Each step toward the entrance echoed like an impending storm. When they reached Malone's apartment, Davis knocked firmly on the door. Silence ensued. Then the sound of shuffling footsteps echoed within. When the door finally creaked open, a disheveled man appeared, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. What do you want?" he grumbled, attempting to mask an air of annoyance that barely concealed his apprehension. "Mr. Malone! I need to ask you a few questions about Clara Hargrove," Davis said, his voice calm yet firm. Immediately, Long's expression shifted. An unsettling flicker of recognition crossed his face. "I don't know anything about that. I don't want to talk," he retorted, stepping back and trying to close the door. But Davis quickly wedged his foot in the opening, arching a brow as he assessed the man. There was something off about Malone's demeanor, a tightness in his posture that suggested he had more to hide. "We have reports placing you at the diner on the night Clara disappeared. You cannot walk away from it." "Yeah, realizing he was cornered, Malone hesitated, eyes darting. Davis pressed, his voice steady as he took a step closer. "I didn't follow anyone," he spat, the fire in his voice igniting more his latent rage. "I was just having a drink, okay? I left right after." Davis felt the tension crackling in the air, a fragile barrier teetering on the edge of collapse. Witnesses remember you leaving in a hurry, Jason. We need to know where you went, and why a witness saw you looking at her like that. Malone's bravado wavered but still hunkered down. You don't have anything on me, he snapped, with a wild glint in his eyes. As the officers prepared to search the apartment with a warrant, the suffocating reality of the moment settled in around him. Here stood a man already caught in the tangled web of his own making, and the shadows of suspicion loomed large overhead. Detective Davis had glimpsed desperation, and inside that guarded anger, he sensed something deeper, an indication of the truths hidden beneath layers of resentment. The suspect had emerged, but the hardest part still lay ahead, peeling back the fractured layers of Malone's life. A pathway that could guide them into the dark corners of Clara's final moments and perhaps bring clarity to a town that had been shaken to its core. Chapter 8. The trial, no. As autumn painted the trees in shades of gold and rust, the atmosphere in Roseland grew heavy with anticipation. The trial of Jason Malone. The trial of Jason Malone began on a brisk day in November, the small town closing in on the Warren courthouse that had witnessed decades of stories, both tragic and triumphant. Clara Hargrove's name hung in the air like a whisper, stirring emotions that had simmered beneath the surface since her murder. Inside the austere courtroom, the gallery was packed with Clara's friends, former students, and community members, all hungry for justice. They would bear witness to the narrative that had unfolded over months of investigation, a stark reminder of how something so vibrant had been shadowed by darkness. The judge, a stout woman with graying hair, banged her gavel to call the proceedings to order. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of Clara's last days, delving into Jason Malone's history and surmising how his volatile nature could have turned towards wild. They recounted the timeline, the band scene and at the diner, the eyewitness statements, and the evidence that linked him to the trail where Clara's body was found. A forensic expert presented blood evidence collected from the driver's side of the van, further solidifying the case against him. As the prosecution laid out its argument, eyes swiveled toward Jason, watching his reaction. He sat slouched, arms crossed defiantly. Yet the flicker of anxiety was evident. The tension contorted his features into a mask of defiance and despair. When his defense took the stage, it unfolded with vehement calls for doubt. They hammered home the notion that reasonable suspicion wasn't enough to grant a verdict of guilt. They painted Malone as a victim of circumstantial evidence, a man who had the misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. No concrete evidence links my client to this crime, his attorney argued. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, that you are being asked to fill in the gaps of a horrifying narrative with nothing but conjecture. As Malone's defense lawyer tore pieces from the prosecution's case, the gallery writhed, tension mounting with disbelief. Clara's supporters could hardly sit still. Anger ignited in their hearts as they watched their beloved teacher be overshadowed by legal maneuverings that twisted facts into convenient untruths. With each passing day, the emotions in the courtroom fluctuated like a pendulum. Clara's friends and family took the stand, their testimonies weaving together memories of laughter and support, a poignant contrast to the cold, sterile atmosphere of the trial. Each story recounted the love and light she had shared with those around her, reinforcing how the darkness had disrupted the fragile fabric of their lives. As the trial neared its conclusion, the tension became tangible. In his closing statements, the prosecutor painted a vivid image of Clara's last moments, a reminder that she had once stood where they did. A person with dreams, hopes, and the misfortune of crossing paths with someone dangerous. The jury filed out, the weight of their responsibility hanging heavy in the air. Outside, faces turned upward toward the sky, each breath held in anticipation. Clutching one another, friends and family whispered prayers, hoping for a verdict that would at last bring the closure Clara's memory and her community so desperately needed. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned, and silence engulfed the courtroom. Davis watched intently as the foreman rose. A sullen expression etched across his face. We find the defendant, Jason Malone, guilty of first-degree murder. As the words echoed, an audible gasp filled the room, followed by tears and quiet sobs that pierced through the air. Clara's friends embraced, relief washing over them in waves, bittersweet as they realized that while justice had prevailed, it could never replace the warmth of the woman they would forever mourn. Malone's expression soured, a mixture of surprise and fury animating his features. Yet justice cast its long shadow in the courtroom, firmly standing against the currents of grief. Clara's life had been cut short, but through the tireless efforts of those determined to seek truth, the echoes of her legacy would resound forever in the hearts of those left behind. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The trial brought an abrupt close to the immediate chaos, but the ripples of Clara Hargrove's murder swept through Roseland like an unrelenting tide. In the aftermath, the town grappled with the fragile nature of safety, the kind of disquiet that lingered long after the gavel fell and the courtroom doors closed. Each morning, the sun rose over the coastal town. Yet the shadows of loss clung stubbornly. In the weeks that followed the verdict, her friends and family, while relieved to see justice served, found themselves in the uncomfortable position of navigating grief. And support groups sprouted in the community, a safe haven for those needing to process their emotions. Sarah, Clara's closest friend, took the lead, determined to ensure Clara's spirit lived on in stories shared and memories reloved. "I want to create a scholarship in her name," she announced one evening at a gathering, a glow of resolution breaking through the heaviness. She always cared about helping her students, and this could be one way to carry that forward. The room erupted in supportive nods and murmurs of agreement. A collective sense of purpose began to emerge from the ashes. Meanwhile, Detective Mark Davis found himself reflecting on the case, not just as a professional endeavor, but as a moral obligation to Clara's legacy. He revisited old leads, speaking with residents who had stayed quiet out of fear or apathy. With each conversation, he sought to strengthen the bond between the police department and the community, recognizing that trust was essential in combating the shadows that had taken hold of Roseland. The local newspaper ran a series of articles revisiting the case, highlighting the vulnerabilities that Clara faced and urging readers to remain vigilant. It was a call to arms of sorts. People began organizing town halls to discuss safety measures, launch neighborhood watch programs, and pave ways to support local law enforcement. The community, once wrapped in a false sense of security, began to rally, determined to transform their pain into action and awareness. Yet, amid these efforts, there was a palpable thread of discontent woven into their result. Not everyone viewed the trial as a resounding success. Some residents harbored resentment toward how the legal system had functioned, Feeling that the town had failed Clara in some way, debates erupted over whether enough was done sooner to protect her. These conversations didn't diminish the grief. They layered it with guilt and unease. As weeks turned into months, Clara's name became synonymous with change, her memory serving as both a catalyst and a bittersweet reminder of what was lost. The scholarship program launched successfully, funding students who shared her passion for history and education. The first recipients taking the stage to deliver heartfelt speeches in her honor. And yet, as the seasons turned, the shadows of memory occasionally returned to engulf Davis. He stood at the edge of the coastal trail where it all began, contemplating not just the case but the realization that justice could represent different things to different people. For him, it was an ongoing commitment to safeguarding those who didn't have a voice, to preventing another tragic story from unfolding. Within the heart of Roseland, Clara would forever be an indelible presence, a whisper in the wind, a call to action. While the town worked to stitch itself back together, the journey unfolded like a tapestry, each thread a collective commitment to honor her legacy, ensuring that, despite the dark light, could still break through in unexpected and meaningful ways. Chapter 10. Reflection. As the first anniversary of Clara Hargrove's death approached, the town of Roseland gathered on a chilly evening, their breath visible in the crisp air. A candlelight vigil was organized, a gentle array of flickering flames illuminating the night, as friends, family, and strangers united in remembrance. The soft glow transformed the once familiar coastal trail into a sacred space where grief intertwined with hope, an opportunity for closure amidst the anguish. Amongst the crowd, Detective Mark Davis stood quietly, overwhelmed by the number of people touched by Clara's life. Each face carried a story, a fragment of the woman who had shaped the hearts of many. The organizing committee had invited teachers, students, and other community figures to share their memories, each narrative capturing Clara's essence, the kindness she spread, and her unwavering commitment to education. As a student stepped forward to recite a poem Clara had written years before, tears glistened in Davis's eyes. Her words about perseverance and the impact of love resonated through the crowd, echoing the truths that lingered long after death. In that moment, it became abundantly clear that Clara was more than just a victim. She was a catalyst for change, forcing the town to confront the fragility of their safety and the importance of solidarity.